too far in this exploration of the applications, I want to bring one point to the fore. I'm using the hidden tradition as my basis, right? The hidden tradition of the Yang style of Tai Chi. So, how to make what I'm talking about more relevant to other styles? Well, the thing you have to think about is, how can you integrate some of the basic principles that you find in the hidden tradition, the Michuan style, into your form? And some of them are very basic, simple things. Like, for example, the reliance on the rear leg when you're doing all the moves, right? Using the hips, turning the hips to support moves, sitting on that rear leg so that the front leg is freer to move. So it usually requires just a slight change in what you're doing. So the clearest example is, single whip. Right, in the classic Yang style, we're here and we're sitting on that front leg. By doing that, first of all, it means my weight is on the same side as the striking hand. So my weight in this case is in my left foot and I'm striking with my left hand. All I have to do is to shift the weight slightly further back so that I'm now pushing off that rear leg. So I'm pushing off the right leg, striking with the left hand. So there's a diagonal across the body. So that's what we want. So instead of sitting here, you sit here. It's a slight change, but you'll feel that now you have that leg strength that you can use to push or strike. The other thing is, usually the feet are going to be a little more narrow. So again, here when we're in the single whip, instead of being far on this side, just bring your foot here. So single whip becomes more here, all right? So I'm not planted as much in the legs. By bringing my feet together, I'm keeping that connection to the rear leg. So here I'm 60-40 or 60-40 here, right? Instead of being 80-20 and sitting on that front leg. So I'm here. It's the exact same move, but it's the placement of the weight that's going to matter, right? So now you can go through your form, whichever it is, and just make those slight corrections, right? So it's slightly smaller, connected to that rear leg, looking for the diagonal across the body. So I'm pushing off my right leg because I'm pushing with the left hand. If I wanted to, in this foot position, strike with my right hand, I would sit, turn the hip, and strike with the right. So weight is on the left, striking with the right. And I turn the hip, that's what powers the strike, right? So if you just do these slight changes, your form is going to get a little closer to this hidden tradition and to these principles and these fighting principles, because this is a terrible, terrible fighting position. This is a bad habit to have anyway. So this is much better. And on top of that, there's a Qigong or energetic component to this. If I'm here, my back curves. Right? If my back is curved, it means that I'm actually disconnecting the points that go through the body that connect the Tai Chi poles, right? So, or the central meridian that goes through the body in front of the spine. What I want is to actually have my hips slightly tucked, right? So there's a line that goes through the crown of the head, through the body, through the perineum, basically. And I want that line to be as straight and vertical as possible. So when I do single whip, if I'm here, that connection is broken. If I'm here, that connection is there. So now you can start doing your whole form, right? Hip slightly tucked, vertical line through the body, and this actually lights up the Tai Chi pole, right? Because you've aligned head to hips. All right, so they're vertical along one another. So this breaks that line, this doesn't. So again, it's a matter of bringing Tai Chi and making it slightly smaller, right? Slightly more vertical, less leaning onto that front leg, less of those deep sits onto the front leg. And that will change the martial applications, first of all, but it should also change the energetic. So I would recommend that no matter what style you're doing, you start to keep those ideas in mind, right? So slightly narrow foot stance, the connection in the diagonal, so that you have a connection between the leg and the striking hand, boom, boom, and the energetics, meaning the crown of the head, perineum are lined up. So we can't do that 100% of the time, but that should be the reference point so that I can go away from it, I can go away from that line in no matter what I do, but I'm always coming back to it. So notice that even here, if I'm here and I kick, there's a straight line going from crown of the head through the perineum. Energetically, I'm lined up. Tai Chi Polken is activated, right? So even here, boom, boom, I'm still lined up. Everything is activated no matter what I'm doing. So I'm trying to preserve that verticality. It's not static. I've seen people say, you know, the hips stay level at all times and they never rise up and down, which I think is a misinterpretation of this principle of activating the Tai Chi pole. It's not that the hips don't move up and down, it's that the relationship between the hips and the head needs to be preserved as much as possible. It's not always possible, but as much as possible. So that's what you're trying to do. That's why there's that tucking of the tailbone, right? That lines you up. So now you do your Tai Chi like that. Again, you don't want to be rigid. You know, there is movement. There are moments where you're going to turn and do all sorts of things, but that's going to be the reference point. Here, that connection is broken. Here, it's not. Now I'm engaged. Boom, boom. Right? So if you just do those few things, slightly smaller footprint, so the feet are slightly closer together apart. We'll see that we're going to break that very soon, actually, right, when we do the big step, but that's a choice. And there's a purpose in taking a big step in the hidden tradition, as opposed to here in single whip, where you just have a wide stance and it doesn't really do anything for you. So slightly narrow stance, making sure you have a connection, especially with the rear leg going across a diagonal, so that the weight that carries the leg that carries your weight is at the diagonal to the hand that is doing the strike. So right leg across the left hand or left hand, right? So always the diagonal, and the preservation of this vertical line connecting crown of the head to the perineum, right? The Tai Chi pole that goes through the center of the body. So if you manage to do that, if you do those slight changes to your own form, and then hopefully the principles I'm talking about will apply to the Tai Chi that you're doing as well.